Welcome back. In this explainer, we're unpacking a pretty dramatic story, how the entire world became absolutely hooked on a single natural resource. We're talking oil. It's a massive tale of ancient civilizations, bold innovators, and this constantly shifting balance of global power that, quite frankly, still shapes our reality today. Let's get right into it.
What a blessing oil has been to mankind. That's a bold statement from history's most famous oil baron, John D. Rockefeller. And from the perspective of sheer industrial growth, he hit the nail on the head. For a century and a half, oil has literally fueled the rapid rise of modern civilization, powering the whole shebang, from our factories right down to our cars.
But this really begs a massive question, doesn't it? How exactly did this sticky black ooze go from being just a localized ancient utility to the absolute most fiercely contested global commodity? Think about it. We are talking about a resource that dictates wars, triggers severe economic recessions, and completely rewrites geopolitical borders.
So here is our roadmap for tracing the chronological arc of who actually controlled the oil. We're going to cover 1. Ancient seeps to Greek fire. 2. The birth of modern oil. 3. The Seven Sisters Cartel. 4. Sovereignty and the OPEC era. And finally, 5. The 1970s oil shocks.
All right, Section 1. Ancient seeps to Greek fire. Early uses of petroleum. Let's clear something up right away. Oil is absolutely not a modern discovery.
Way before the Industrial Revolution even kicked off, ancient civilizations across the globe were already tapping into surface seeps of bitumen. Picture this, around 3000 BC, Mesopotamians were actually using it to caulk their ships and build the walls of Babylon. Then, jump to 347 AD, and the Chinese were doing something incredibly advanced, using bamboo pipelines to transport natural gas to evaporate brine for salt. And over in Japan, by the 7th century, they were burning what they called burning water for light. Pretty wild, right?
Oil was even used as an early, absolutely terrifying weapon of war. The Byzantines developed something called Greek fire. Now, this was a highly flammable, top-secret mixture of petroleum and lime. It was a devastating naval weapon, an incendiary projectile that terrified attacking ships for centuries. Why? Because it would violently catch fire the exact moment it touched moisture. No way to put that out easily.
Moving on to Section 2, Birth of Modern Oil, the Industrial Boom. By the 19th century, the world was facing a massive energy deficit. Traditional lighting sources, primarily whale oil, were dwindling fast because, sperm whales were hunted almost to extinction.
This energy crunch set the perfect stage, and here is where everything changes. In 1859, Edwin Drake struck oil in Titusville, Pennsylvania. Now, while it wasn't the very first oil well in human history, Drake's well definitely touched off a major boom in America. It introduced cheap, easily distilled kerosene that just spread like wildfire, rapidly replacing whale oil and effectively solving the big energy crisis of that era.
Soon after, though, the invention of the incandescent light bulb actually threatened the kerosene market. But right on cue, the internal combustion engine arrived, and this completely changed the game. It exponentially grew the demand for a totally different petroleum byproduct, gasoline. This explosive new era brought us massive gushers, like the famous 1901 Spindletop in Texas, and fueled the rapid rise of the automobile and early gas stations.
Okay, so that brings us to Section 3, the Seven Sisters Cartel, the Age of Oligarchy. Because as demand just completely skyrocketed throughout the 20th century to fuel global transportation and huge military conflicts, control of this vital resource fell into the hands of a remarkably small, exclusive club.
This small oligarchy became known as the Seven Sisters. Dominated by Western majors like Standard Oil, Royal Dutch Shell, and BP, these guys completely controlled the whole process: global exploration, production, refining, shipping, you name it. Operating on these standard 50-50 profit-sharing concessions, they basically dictated the terms of global trade right from their boardrooms in New York and London. Meanwhile, the sovereign host nations in the Middle East and Latin America, they were simply expected to supply the land.
Now for Section 4. Sovereignty and the OPEC era, the geopolitical rebellion. You see, this post-war oil order rested on some incredibly fragile political ground. The oil, after all, belonged to sovereign nations, and many of them were newly independent. So naturally, a profound geopolitical rebellion was about to begin.
The first real crack in the system, it came from an Italian disruptor named Enrico Monte, head of the company Eni, While the Seven Sisters were forcing that standard 50-50 profit sharing with total Western control, Mattei totally shocked the majors. He went in and offered producing nations revolutionary 75-25 profit sharing terms. But even more importantly, he offered them joint management. Mattei essentially proved that this giant Seven Sisters monopoly could, in fact, be successfully challenged.
And these producing nations were learning quickly. Major geopolitical events really started to accelerate this shift. Take the 1956 Suez Crisis, for instance. A blocked canal severely disrupted Europe's oil shipments, which practically overnight proved the extreme vulnerability of Western energy security. Then, in August 1960, Western companies unilaterally cut what they called posted prices. This instantly reduced host nation revenues without even consulting them. Well, that was the final straw. It triggered some serious, visionary diplomacy from leaders in Venezuela and Saudi Arabia, who pushed hard for collective action to protect their economic sovereignty.
So, in September 1960, taking a truly momentous step to counter those multinational giants, delegations from Saudi Arabia, Iran, Kuwait, Venezuela, and Iraq met up in Baghdad. And right there, they officially established OPEC, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. The era of unchecked Western dominance was officially on notice. Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, the 1970s oil shocks, the world shifts. Because by the early 1970s, the balance of power had shifted decisively. It moved away from the Western oil majors and landed squarely into the hands of these sovereign producing nations. And that power shift culminated in a pretty staggering number, 300%, during the 1973 Arab oil embargo, which kicked off during the Yom Kippur War. The price of oil skyrocketed by nearly 300%. We were talking a jump from around $3 a barrel to nearly $12 globally. This exposed, in a really terrifying way, the vulnerability of Western economies that had just become completely addicted to cheap Middle Eastern crude.
The economic shock from this was just devastating. To put it in perspective, global GDP growth plunged from a really healthy 6.9% in 1973 down to a mere 1.4% by 1975. This bitter combination of stagnant economic growth paired with rampant price inflation led economists to coin a brand new, very gloomy term, stagflation. I mean, lines at gas stations wrapped around blocks, unemployment spiked, and the global economy essentially ground to a halt. However, as painful as these shocks were, they did force some necessary adaptation. The industrialized world simply had to introduce permanent energy-saving technologies and really shift toward far more efficient petroleum usage. It also directly led to the creation of the International Energy Agency, or the IEA, specifically to coordinate global energy security. Ultimately, it was a really hard-learned realization that energy independence is absolutely not a given. It requires constant effort and massive political will.
And so we arrive at a really critical thought for today. With major global energy transitions currently underway, we've got to ask ourselves, who is going to control the power of the 21st century? As we navigate this huge shift toward renewable energy, we really need to look back at this history. These geopolitical power struggles over oil have taught us time and time again that energy is never just about economics, it is the absolute foundation of power, of sovereignty, and of security. So, what will the next chapter look like? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, stay focused, and I'll catch you next time.